Hello, and thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of Storytime. Today's story is called Burning Brushes, and it's from my collection, Peripheral Visions and Other Stories. Burning Brushes. The brushes are burning. My grandmother's murmur echoes in the room, flowing over neatly sharpened pencils and sheets of empty paper. When I was a child, I took her words literally and would peer around the doorway of the place she called her studio, hoping to catch a glimpse of sparks or the scent of smoke in the air. Instead, all I saw was a tiny woman, enveloped in her dead husband's work shirt, the filbert brush held tightly in her paint-stained hand. Peering intently at the canvas before her, she would be oblivious to my presence. And once the bristles darted at the canvas, I would withdraw, knowing it would be hours before she would enter the world again. Most of my grandmother's canvases are stacked in my spare bedroom. I was chosen to be the curator of her art, as the only other family member with creative tendencies, said in the same tone of voice that would have been used had I inherited some strange familial disease. While other family members fought over silver and china, old draperies and bedding, I alone requested and was granted the canvas and the paints. I thought they would inspire me. Instead, they served as a reproach, mocking my inability to produce anything more than the occasional piece of writing that would find a home in newsprint grade magazines. My grandmother was 23 when she started painting, and she kept on painting even after she buried my grandfather and sold the home in which they had lived for over 40 years. She moved into my mother's house when I was in my mid-20s and expecting my first child, and was still there when my daughter graduated from high school. By then, however, her arthritic fingers could no longer grasp the brushes, and her eyes could no longer distinguish between the white of the canvas and the soft yellows and greens that characterized her work. But she would still disappear into the studio each morning, perhaps hoping for some residual warmth from the brushes that no longer flamed with life. I am 20 years older than my grandmother was when she released the fire within her, and theoretically have more time to pursue my writing. My day job hardly taxes my creative abilities. Monitoring cash flow and receivables is left brain occupation. And once I return home, there are no crying children or mounds of dirty laundry to demand my attention. Nothing, in short, to keep me from the lined tablet and pencils, the keyboard, and reams of 20-pound bond. Yet aside from a few insignificant pieces, I have been unable to write. My brushes no longer burn. And if they ever did, the ashes are so cold that it would take more fuel than I possess to start the fire again. Some nights I toy with the idea of quitting my job, taking what little savings I had managed to amass after my divorce and writing full-time every day. Or maybe I think I should cut myself off from my family, tell my parents to stop calling with their endless complaints about each other, explain to my daughter that she is old enough to solve her problems on her own. Perhaps isolation is the key. And yet my grandmother painted in a house full of people. It would be so much easier to let it all go, to let the desire, to take that desire and pack it away like maternity clothes that are no longer needed. And occasionally I try to do it. I stack the papers in a carton, pile the unfinished manuscripts into a drawer, turn my desk back into a dining room table. The books on writing are given away, and subscriptions to literary magazines are not renewed. I consider taking courses in real estate or trips to foreign lands. I make plans with old friends for dinner and agree to meet relative strangers for drinks. Houseplants are purchased. Apartment walls are repapered. Makeup and hairstyle updated. But some part of me knows these to be futile acts. And when I least expect it, the urge returns. Like a junkie, I scrabble frantically through the closet, searching for that half-finished novel or essay, certain that the ideas, so long awaited, are now ready to be fully developed on paper. I brush aside the latest movie review and set the paperclip pages before me, pencil at the ready, fingers itching to write the rest of the story. Then quickly, like the brief flame from a match, the fire dies. And unlike the ashes my grandmother could breathe to life again and again, I'm left with nothing. No spark, no warmth. The pages remain empty. The pencil point, as sharp as when I took it from its resting place. And I am cold. So cold that all the fires of hell would not be able to warm me. So that is a brief excerpt from Burning Brushes. Uh, you know, it's one of those stories that I think will really resonate with, well, certainly with other writers, with people who long to pursue a creative urge that they've held for a long time. Might be painting, might be writing, might be anything. Creativity knows no bounds, no limitations. But unfortunately, creativity is also a bit fickle. Sometimes you can feel your most creative when you are also taxed with a variety of other obligations. You know, a story will start in your mind and you're thinking, oh, if I could only have 15 minutes, 20 tops, I could get this written. I could at least get it drafted. I could at the very least write some notes about it. But even those 20 minutes can be hard to find if you've got other obligations, work obligations, family obligations, whatever the obligations are. And it's the same with anyone in the creative field. There's always this challenge of finding time, the right time, the time to really get into whatever the work is. And then there's the flip side of it, you know. We tend to think that, oh, if we only had the time, if we only had some peace and quiet. And then there may come a time when you do have the time, the peace, the quiet, the room of your own, as Virginia Woolf mentioned. You have this time, maybe an afternoon, maybe a day, maybe a week. Maybe for the lucky ones, you might have longer and you're thinking, oh, this is perfect. I can pursue it. I can weave my tapestry. I can paint my landscapes. I can write my novel. I can create that dance that it's been in my head all this time. And you get all ready to do it. And guess what? Nothing's happening. Engine won't turn over. The fire isn't lit. The brushes don't burn. Whatever metaphor you want to use, it just isn't there. You can't figure out where did it go, you know. Thought I put it away. Thought I put it in a box and labeled it for someday. Okay. And that's a scary thing, you know. And it doesn't matter how many times you have been through that situation. Doesn't matter how many times you have had those periods where you think nothing is going to happen now. My creativity is gone. The muse has up and left me. And then something happens, creativity comes back, inspiration strikes, the muse decides to knock on your door again. And you're like, oh, great. And you get involved in whatever it is that you wanted to write or paint or whatever. And you forget about those terrible times when you think it's never going to happen again, that the last thing I wrote, the last thing I drew, the last step that I danced is literally the last one I'll do. The problem is, this is the way it goes. You know, there's a lot of books out there that'll tell you this is how you keep your inspiration alive. You work on it every day. You don't let too long go between writing or whatever the creativity outlet is that you're pursuing. And that's absolutely true. I can tell you that from experience. What a lot of the books don't tell you is, how do you deal with it though? You know, okay, so say my choice is to do 30 minutes a day writing before I get started on any other task, any other client projects or whatever. So I devote 30 minutes a day with a goal of maybe starting a short story, working on a scene in a novel, whatever it is. And sometimes it goes well. Okay, this morning, as a matter of fact, I happened to start playing with the idea of a fun little short story. A lot of days it goes really badly. You start writing something and you haven't even gotten 5 minutes into it and you're saying, this is so bad. I cannot hit the delete key fast enough. Or you get frustrated because something that you thought had a lot of potential that perhaps you started yesterday, the day before, last week, last month, all of a sudden it's just not going anywhere. You know, you can't figure out how to bring it back to life. It's just laying there like a moldy old corpse. It's scary and it's frightening, and you start judging your capabilities. You start judging your artistry, you start judging your gift. And from there, you expand it to judging everything, including your choice of occupation. And you say, I can't do this again. I can't put myself through this again. This is a terrible, terrible thing. Yes, we have all been there. And I would love to tell you there's a very simple solution, but if there was a very simple solution, I wouldn't be dealing with the problem myself as I do on more occasions than I care to think about. But what I do know, what the character will learn as you read the story, is that you have to believe, you have to hope, you have to keep going. If you let the brushes sit there too long, to use the metaphor in the story, if you let them sit there so long that they become dry and unusable, that the paints themselves become dry and unusable, then it's going to be much harder, if not impossible, to pursue that creative outlet that you so want to pursue. So here is my 2 cents for what it's worth, sparked by this story. 2 cents number 1, don't judge. If you're doing your 30 minutes a day, if you're doing your 3 pages a day, however it is you are structuring your writing time, your creativity time, don't judge it. Don't judge the output while you're doing it. Don't judge the output when your time is up, because that will be enough. If it's not quite up to what you've set as your standards, that'll be enough to kill the next day for you. My second 2 cents worth is have a routine, have a schedule, do it regularly. Don't expect anything out of that allocated time except that you will be present. You will be present for whatever happens. Maybe something good will happen. Maybe it'll be 30 minutes, 3 pages worth, whatever, of total garbage that you don't want to keep. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you put in the time. I like to liken this to working out, to racing, to running, for instance. You know, if you only ran on the days when you feel great, you wouldn't be a very good runner, because there's probably a lot of days where you didn't feel all that great, but you went out and ran anyways. The point is, you have to keep the muscles limber. Going back to the metaphor, you have to keep the brushes ready to go. You have to keep the paints in such a condition that when you dip your brush into them, you get wonderful liquid colors. It's important, regardless of what your ultimate goal is for your creative output. Maybe it's just for you. Maybe it's just to share with a few select people. Maybe it's something that you're going to put out into the greater world. Doesn't matter what your goal is. What matters is that you pursue it. You do it regularly. You sit there and open yourself to whatever comes. If it's a day when nothing comes, okay, fine. Tomorrow might be better. Tomorrow, inspiration can come. The muse might show up at your door with a nice little takeout box of great ideas that you can't wait to dig into. But the important thing is always to be there, to be present, to be open to it. That is something that the character is learning in Burning Brushes, and you'll have to read the story to find out what happens, whether her brushes ever catch fire again. And I do hope you will. And if you do, or if you are just someone who is struggling with creativity, then I would love to hear from you about how it's going, what you're doing to keep your brushes alive. Until the next time we meet, I hope you have a creative time ahead of you. And I look forward to sharing another story with you from one of my collections at our next story time. Thanks so much for being part of it. Bye-bye.